What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and it's time for the 5th episode of 5 Questions with Levi, as I am so glad this series has been doing so well, and thank you all who asked in questions for this week's episode. But just as a reminder, be sure to send in questions in the comments section below for next week's episode, episode number 6. But without further ado, let's get started. So the first question comes from Motorsports Fan 17. What's up, man? Do you think the NASCAR Xfinity Series should add a dirt track to their schedule, seeing how popular the trucks are in Eldora, but it should be a size of 1.5 miles to 3/4 of a mile in length? It would be interesting if the Xfinity Series went to a dirt track. However, I don't think they would do Eldora. Maybe they could do Eldora, I don't know. I would like to see them go to somewhere like Oswego or DuQuoin, something like that. I think DuQuoin would be the best fit because I think it's like a mile big, I believe. I'd be interested to see how the racing would go at a track like that for Xfinity. So I would say either Oswego or DuQuoin would be a good picks for the Xfinity Series to run for dirt tracks. Next question comes from Red Racer 1985, a.k.a. Mr. James Qualls. How far back, which decade that is, in metal music does your favorites go back to? Well, it doesn't really matter what decade it's from. I like anything in metal that's good in any decade. Like, hell, my top 5 favorites have bands from the 80s, 70s, and even the current generation, so that should kind of go to tell you how much I love metal music. It doesn't matter what decade it's from, as long as it's good, solid metal. That's all that matters to me. So, yeah, that's pretty much that. But as far as, like, if you were to ask me what was arguably my favorite decade of metal, I would say the 80s, just because the 80s was when a lot of the most popular subgenres of metal really got its start, like thrash metal, death metal, black metal, doom metal, power metal, so many others that grew in the 80s and have continued on to this very day and has diversified. So yeah, if you were to ask me like which decade in metal was my favorite, it probably would be the 80s. With the 90s being a close second. A lot of people say the 90s was a terrible decade for metal. Those people are fucking stupid. It was actually an underrated decade because metal was just growing, not killed, as people kept saying. It was just growing. Next question comes from Daniel Rafael de Jesus. What was your thoughts on Breaking Benjamin and also their new album called Embers? Well, first off, I haven't heard the new Breaking Benjamin album yet, but I've heard some good things about it. However, as far as my thoughts on the band themselves, I grew up listening to Breaking Benjamin when I was about 10, 11 years old, when I believe the album was We Are Not Alone came out. You Are Not Alone, something like that. I believe that was 2004, so I was about 10 at the time. Hiccups. You're about to get them. But yeah, I was about 10 at the time when that album came out, when the band started to blow up in the mainstream popularity sense of music. But I've always liked what I've heard from Breaking Benjamin. I've always heard what I liked from Breaking Benjamin because I always thought they had a cool, like, mellow death guitar tuning sound to it, that C tuning. I wouldn't consider that tuning strictly in melodic death metal. I guess you could just say that it's typically used by mellow death bands, not by other bands in other subgenres of metal or rock, but you kind of get the idea. But I like that C-tuned sound on the songs like Cold, So Cold, like that was a great song. And then of course other great tracks like Diary of Jane, Breath, Until the End, so many others. I know they got back together for the 2015 album and now the new album Embers, but I haven't checked out much from those albums yet, only because I've just been so absorbed with so many other bands that it's kind of a sad case with bands that I grew up with or bands like Breaking Benjamin, Saliva, Slipknot, Seether, Shinedown, most of those like alternative metal / post grunge bands that I grew up listening to as a kid have kind of left my head, just basically because I've discovered so many other bands that I just haven't felt the urge to go back to what I grew up with. So it's kind of a sad case, but doesn't mean I don't like the bands. I do. It's just, I just haven't returned back to them in a long time. Next up from Blaze Life 334, what is the history of you getting into Avenged Sevenfold? And he puts in parentheses, I saw them with Metallica and Volbeat last July. Lucky bastard you. The way I got into Avenged Sevenfold is very, very unorthodox. And kind of funny at the same time. Basically, I discovered the band from the NASCAR Thunder 2004 video game soundtrack, where I heard the song Chapter 4 off of my favorite album of theirs, Waking the Fallen. And I heard that song and it blew me away, and I've been a fan ever since. But yeah, that was how I got into them at first, was through that song on that video game soundtrack. But then got even further into them once I heard they were putting stuff out in 2005 with City of Evil, as I see something on my camera cord. But yeah, when City of Evil came out and I heard those songs like Bad Country and Beast and Harlan, Seize the Day, I became a huge fan of them, and still am a huge fan of them to this day, to the point where they're still my number 2 favorite band of all time, behind Metallica. Nonetheless, yeah, just very, very unorthodox way of getting into a band is through a video game. So, hey, better that than to never discover them, right? And the last question comes from Space Metal Ferrari 248. What do you think is the worst and best NASCAR season of this decade? Well, to answer for best, it's kind of difficult because, well, any good seasons that have happened in this decade have been very few and far between. I would say, I guess the best season of this decade, in my opinion, would be 2011? Maybe? I don't know. But I really enjoyed the 2011 season. But as far as the worst, 2015, hands down, was the worst season of this decade, but 2018's getting very close. Very close, because there's, in Cup at least, there has only been, 2, maybe 3 at most good races this year, and everything else has been mediocre to absolute garbage. So yeah, 2018 right now is kind of getting close to surpassing 2015. However, I would still stick with the 2015 season being the worst, just because the package was awful. There was virtually no competition whatsoever. Plus, the fucking stupidity that was the NASCAR's decision making during the chase, when they decided to not penalize Logano for dumping Matt Kenseth at Kansas. They don't penalize Kevin Harvick for wrecking half the field at Talladega on purpose, and yet they penalize Matt Kenseth for wrecking Logano at Martinsville? Does not add up to me in my brain, and I'm gonna get into this just a little bit here, but ever since this whole boys have at it thing has happened, anytime you see people wrecking each other on purpose, it just becomes a massive shit show. NASCAR needs to bring back the black flag for aggressive driving, because it'll at least give some incentive to these drivers to not fucking go out and have a massive free-for-all and cause a massive shitstorm, because whenever drivers are free to wreck whoever they want, we get situations like 2015 at Martinsville where people are on the fence about whether or not Kenseth should be suspended. So yeah, NASCAR needs to cut the drama and just reinforce the black flag for aggressive driving penalty, because at least that calmed things down for a certain time, and we weren't getting all this mumbo-jumbo, unnecessary drama bullshit and whatnot. But yeah, that was partially the reason why 2015 was so bad, was the inconsistent calls on people wrecking each other. It just... I don't understand. But 2011 I thought was the best, simply put, because at least there was some competition that happened, and also that excellent battle in the chase between Edwards and Stewart. Even though Edwards got robbed of a championship again, it was still a fun season, nonetheless. But anyways, that does it for episode number 5 of 5 Questions with Levi. Be sure to send in questions in the comments section below for next week's episode, episode number 6. But until then, thank you for watching, peace out, and I will see you soon.